Stop everything and do not scroll past this moment, because what you are about to hear is not just another explanation or excuse. It is the exact second everything people thought they knew about Joseph Zeng and Tan Songyun began to unravel. And if you stay with this until the very end, you're going to understand why one leaked audio did not just explain his absence. It revealed a truth no one was prepared to face. The night of the event was supposed to be perfect. Lights, cameras, a carefully curated atmosphere where everything looked effortless. Tan Songyun stepped into that space with her usual calm presence, smiling, greeting, moving through the moment as if nothing was missing. But something was, and everyone could feel it, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a space that should have been filled, but was not. Joseph Zeng was not there, and that absence did not go unnoticed. At first, people tried to explain it away. Scheduling conflict, last-minute change, something simple, something that did not carry meaning. But the longer the night went on, the more that explanation began to feel incomplete. Because some absences do not feel accidental. They feel intentional. Days passed. The questions grew. The silence remained. And then the audio surfaced. Not announced. Not confirmed. Just shared. Quietly. At first. Until it reached the point where it could no longer be ignored. The recording was not clear. Not polished. Not something meant for public ears. But it did not need to be. Because what mattered was not how it sounded. It was what it revealed. Joseph Zeng's voice came through first. Lower than usual. Measured. But carrying something that could not be hidden. He was not speaking for an audience. He was not performing. He was explaining. Not publicly, but privately. And that difference changed everything. He spoke about the event. Not as something he chose to miss, but as something he was not allowed to attend. The words were careful. Not direct, but clear enough. There had been a directive. A decision made beyond him. A choice that was not his. And that was where everything shifted. Because this was no longer about absence. It was about control. He explained that his presence at that event was considered a risk. Not professionally, not publicly, but personally. That the connection between him and Tan Songyun had reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. And instead of being acknowledged, it was managed, restricted, separated. Not because it was wrong, but because it was becoming too real, too visible, too powerful. The silence in the recording said, as much as the words, pauses, breaths, moments where it felt like even speaking carried consequences. And then came the part that no one expected. He admitted that he did not fight it. Not fully. Not the way he wanted to. Because he understood what was at stake. Not just for him, but for her. And that was where the weight of the moment became clear. This was not just about one missed event. It was about a choice. Between something personal and something that could affect everything around it. Tan Songyun's reaction that night began to make sense in a way it had not before. The calm, the composure, the way she moved through the event without showing anything beyond what was expected. Because sometimes understanding does not remove emotion. It contains it, hides it beneath what needs to be seen. When the audio spread, the narrative shifted. People stopped asking why he was not there, and started asking what had been happening all along. Every past interaction was revisited, every moment reconsidered, looking for something that had once been invisible and was now impossible to ignore. But the most powerful part of the story was not the leak itself. It was what happened after. Because once something like that is revealed, there are only two directions things can go: silence or truth. Joseph Zeng did not rush to confirm anything. He did not deny it. He did not explain it away. And that silence felt different now. Not empty, but intentional. As if he understood that some truths cannot be explained without consequences. Tan Songyun remained the same outwardly. Calm, focused, unchanged. But the perception around her shifted. Because people now saw something deeper. Something that had been hidden beneath everything they thought they knew. The story does not end with confirmation. It does not end with everything revealed. because some truths remain just beyond reach. Not because they are meant to deceive, but because they are too complex to be reduced to a single moment. It ends with something far more powerful: awareness. The understanding that not everything we see is complete, that not every absence is accidental, that sometimes what is kept apart is done so not out of indifference, but out of something much harder to navigate. So now the only question that remains is this: when a connection becomes too real to ignore but too complicated to exist openly, do you fight to keep it, or do you step back to protect everything around it? If this moment made you question everything and you want to uncover what happens next, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who understands that the most powerful stories are not always the ones fully told. They're the ones hidden just beneath the surface, waiting to be understood. The moment the audio stopped, it should have answered everything, but instead it created a silence that felt even louder than the leak itself. And if you stay with this until the very end, you're going to understand why what happened after that recording between Joseph Zeng and Tan Songyun was not about confirming the truth, it was about facing it. For a while, nothing happened publicly. No statements. No clarifications. No attempts to control the narrative. And that silence began to carry a different kind of weight. Because now people were no longer reacting to speculation. They were reacting to something that felt real. Something that could not be easily dismissed. Behind the scenes, the situation shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way that could be seen. But in a way that could be felt. Joseph Zeng became quieter. More reserved. Not avoiding everything, but choosing his moments more carefully. As if he understood that every action now carried meaning. Tan Songyun remained composed, as she always had been, but there was something different in the way she moved through public spaces. A calm that felt intentional, a focus that suggested she was holding something back, not hiding, but protecting. Eventually they met again, not in a place of pressure, not where anything could be interrupted, just a quiet moment where the conversation that had been avoided could no longer wait. Joseph spoke first. Not repeating what was already heard in the audio, but continuing it. He told her that everything in the recording was true, not exaggerated, not misunderstood, but incomplete, because what the audio did not capture was what came after. He admitted that the directive had been real, that the separation had been intentional, but he also admitted something more difficult, that he had agreed to it, not because he wanted to, but because he believed it was the safest choice. Not for himself, but for everything around them. Tan Songyun listened, not interrupting, not reacting immediately, because this was not a moment for quick responses. This was a moment for understanding something that had been hidden beneath everything else. She asked him something simple. If it was so important, why did it have to be hidden? And that question changed everything, because it did not challenge the situation. It challenged the decision. Joseph paused, not because he did not have an answer, but because he knew the answer was not simple. He explained that sometimes things are not hidden because they are wrong. They are hidden because they are complicated, because they do not fit into what is expected, because they create consequences that cannot be controlled. And that was what he had been trying to avoid. Not the connection, but the impact it could have. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was clear. Because now everything was understood. Not perfectly, but enough. Tan Songyun stepped back slightly, not creating distance, but creating space to think, to process, to decide what everything meant beyond the moment. She told him that what mattered was not just the reason. It was the choice. That even when things are complicated, people still choose how they respond to them. And that choice is what defines everything that comes after. Joseph did not argue. He did not defend himself. He accepted it, because he understood that this was not about being right. It was about being honest. Days passed, and something unexpected happened. The tension did not disappear, but it softened. Not because the situation had changed, but because the understanding had. They began to speak again. Not frequently. Not intensely, but enough. Enough to keep something alive. Enough to show that what existed between them had not completely faded. The final moment came quietly, not in front of cameras, not in a setting meant for attention, just the two of them again, standing in a moment that felt both familiar and new. Joseph looked at her, not asking for anything, not expecting anything, just present. Tan Songyun met his gaze, and for a long moment nothing needed to be said, because everything had already been understood. She told him something simple, that she did not regret what they had, even if it had to be hidden, even if it had to be complicated, because some connections are not defined by how they are seen, but by how they are felt. Joseph nodded, not with relief, but with acceptance, because he understood that this was not a resolution. It was an understanding. The story does not end with everything revealed. It does not end with a clear outcome. It ends with something far more real, a quiet acceptance of what is,
and what cannot be changed.
Because not every story is meant to be fully visible. Some exist in the spaces between what is said and what is left unsaid. And now the only question that remains is this. When something feels real but cannot exist the way you want it to, do you hold on to it in whatever way you can? Or do you let it go to protect everything else around it? If this continuation made you feel something real and you want to see what happens next, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who understands that the most powerful stories are not always the ones that are fully seen. They're the ones that are deeply felt.